Okay, Ned, welcome to the Vertical SaaS Podcast. Great to have you
Thanks
on.
so much, Gavin. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to the
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, I'm excited to have you on. We've been kicking it about back and forth. You've been very busy, as have I. It seems like you've not been in the one place for too long recently. You've been on your travels quite a bit.
Yeah. I just returned from a trip to Abu Dhabi and then a number of cities in India. So the first part was to meet with clients, and the second part was actually to work with some of our engineers in India and also attend two weddings of two of my co-founders. So great experience, but glad to be back and cranking away here just outside New York.
Yeah, yeah. I just missed you when I was over in New York in December, but I did actually see that picture of you at the wedding in India. I noticed you had all the garments on. You were looking well. You pulled it off.
Yeah, yeah, it was my first kurta that I've worn. But yeah, great time. I was encouraged to do a lot of dancing and eat a lot of food. So it was really a pleasure to be there.
Two of my favourite pastimes, dancing and eating.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, hard to
well,
beat.
and everyone who's listening, welcome back to another episode of the show. Today, I'm joined by Ned, of course, who has been at the forefront of legal tech innovation for over a decade now. Don't want to show your age, Ned, but if you've anyone that's following the legal tech space, AI and automation have completely reshaped how we're doing things. And as I say, today I'm joined by the co-founder and CEO of Coheso and Ned Gannon. Coheso is an AI-powered legal front door and work management platform for in-house and compliance teams. And before that, Ned co-founded another legal tech startup, which went on to a successful exit. So super excited to dive into your journey, Ned, hear about your story and chat about all things legal tech. I mean, I feel like even in the past 2 weeks, what's going on in legal tech has just been a bit crazy. But yeah, really looking forward to the conversation again. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's a super exciting time in the space, and as you've said, I've been in the space for quite some time, really since 2012, and have seen it evolve. So yeah, it's great to be working collectively to move things forward for the industry.
Mm. And before we get into the more deeper parts of the conversation, I think it's always nice for the guests that are listening that don't know who you are, for you to give a bit of a kind of soup to nuts, high level summary of, you started your career, of course, as in law as a lawyer, but then quickly that entrepreneurial spirit came out. And one of the first startups you founded wasn't actually a legal tech one, was it? So it'd be great to hear a little bit about your journey from where it started to where you are now and what led you to starting Coheso.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. I began my career as a corporate attorney, primarily focused on mergers and acquisitions on behalf of private equity funds. And I saw a lot of entrepreneurs build great companies up over time, and then we were often representing the funds that were buying them. And I was always fascinated by their own business experiences and their own business journeys. And thought, wow, it would be interesting to be on that side of the table at some point. And then while practicing, I started to shift my practice more towards working with startups and venture capital funds, and was again just very excited about the business side. So decided to make that leap myself. Started as a consultant for a few startups, and then had actually started just kind of a small company working with a few other folks, kind of at the intersection of social media and vehicles. So it was kind of an interesting play, almost like a clean tech startup, and worked on that for a couple years. But at the time, was always thinking about some of the challenges I faced as an attorney. And when I was practicing law, in doing due diligence and M&A, I always thought maybe there was a way to bring some technology to bear to help accelerate that diligence process. So going into data rooms, reading through large volumes of the target company's contracts. And I had seen some technology at Columbia University that was used to summarize news content. And together with my co-founders thought, hey, this could be interesting to bring to contracts. So co-founded eBrevia with a friend of mine from law school and then a machine learning focused engineer. We had worked initially with Columbia University, spun the tech out of Columbia, and then really started raising some funding and moving the business forward. With those first investors, they said, well, you really have to choose between these two startups you're kind of kicking off. If we're investing, we want you fully committed to eBrevia. So that was the direction I moved in, and I'm very glad I did. To just quickly summarize, so eBrevia sells and is continuing to evolve in many exciting ways currently. But in those days, primarily sold to law firms, audit consulting firms, corporate legal departments. As you mentioned, we sold the business in 2018 to a public company called DFIN, or Donnelly Financial Solutions. And then I knew I wanted to get back to building again, really apply some of these lessons I had learned the first time. And when I was thinking about the next challenge, the next problem I wanted to try to solve, I thought about my experience practicing law and often feeling pressure to generate work product more quickly while getting distracted by very routine and repetitive requests. And then subsequently moving on the business side, running the P&L, seeing requests go into legal, sometimes get bogged down just based on the volume of requests coming in and that delaying time to revenue or opening up opportunities for competitors to come into the mix, made me think, wow, there's really an opportunity to solve these twin pain points on the legal and business side and increase some of this synergy between the two areas of the enterprise.
Awesome. What did you do after you sold the company? Do you remember what you did after? Like, because I'd imagine the months leading up to an exit is just, oh man, it must just be crazy. And then the day you wake up and it's like, I don't know, the sheets sign, whatever the process is there. Like, do you remember what you did? Or
Yeah. So it's funny. So we were fortunate. We sold, and you're exactly right. It's extremely busy, kind of moving up to the acquisition itself. We were fortunate in that it hit on December 18th, so right before the holidays. So it made for a very nice holiday season. I was able to relax a little bit. But then started the new year, I came in as president of the eBrevia subsidiary within DFIN and continued to run and grow the business. It was interesting. We were actually post-acquisition really expanded internationally. So we hired folks in London and Tokyo and Hong Kong, and that was all a great learning experience for me. But then the other interesting thing is when I left DFIN, I didn't spend a lot of time. Even after the acquisition, it was a nice rest over Christmas, but got back at it pretty quickly. When I left DFIN, kind of left on a Friday and started Coheso on a Saturday. So I was raring to go. So much opportunity in the space.
yeah, no, there is. I touched on it at the start, but I mean, even just in the past, when I think about the last week's worth of funding, I mean, just the start of 2025 for legal tech and where it's headed, and the noise in the past, 5 to 10 years when you've been building's been there, but it's been up and down, hasn't it? But it feels like it's really hit a bit of a, hockey stick growth for the industry. Kind of feels like they're having their Super Bowl Sunday moment.
I certainly agree with you. It's a incredibly exciting time. It is very different time than when I had started eBrevia back in 2012. In those days, attorneys were very skeptical about leveraging AI. There weren't a lot of AI companies focused on legal, specifically even outside of e-discovery. There had been some advancements there. And I think some of our challenges at that time were really convincing folks that AI could be useful, convincing attorneys AI could be accurate, convincing investors that this made sense. Today, it's a very different landscape where there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm around AI, not just in legal, but across professional services generally. And it's more, the challenge is more just kind of cutting through some of the buzz and the hype and highlighting our value proposition within the legal tech landscape. But it's been, it's been a tremendous journey over the last, 13 years or so.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on that aspect of building eBrevia back then to building now and what's different. But I think just to give a bit more of an insight into Coheso, it's starting to become a very competitive, super competitive space, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of investment in legal tech. Coheso, an AI-powered legal front door, which is your kind of phrase for it, legal front door and work management platform for in-house and compliance teams. For me, do you feel like in the space that you're in right now, it is uber competitive? And And how do you, I guess, take a step back and look at everyone that's trying to automate workflows and manage document systems? Like, how do you take a step back and say, well, we're Coheso, and this is why we're different. This is what sets us apart from the past 100 legal techs that have said they were wanting to do just this, what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's really interesting. When I was thinking about what I wanted to pursue as as the next problem to tackle within legal tech, I took a really broad look at the market, did a lot of research, with industry blogs, publications, podcasts, webinars, and came across this niche that I thought there was a really nice opening here, both based on the experience, as I mentioned, and the problems I had faced as an attorney and then someone running a P&L on the business side, and then looking at the way other companies were thinking about tangential issues. I will say within the space that we're focused on, we don't hit a tremendous amount of direct competitors in our demos. Some of the companies that I think you're referring to, just in terms of funding, which is super exciting for the space, is great in advancing the industry overall. But I don't think particularly hit the use case that we're focused on. It's really interesting. So it might help if I just describe Coheso generally to you.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Coheso is a legal front door, legal assistant, and work management platform for in-house legal and compliance teams. The way the system works is folks on the business side can ask questions through the platform and of the platform. If those questions can be answered based on a company's policies, contracts, or documentation, the system will generate an automated response together with a link to evidence. And then the legal or compliance department can decide if they want those responses to go directly back to the business side or to have them vetted by someone in legal first. Now, the nice thing about this is it takes a tremendous amount of work right off of the legal department's plate. So a constant complaint that we hear is that in-house teams are just overwhelmed. They're getting bogged down with these one-off requests. It's distracting. It's pulling them away from some of that more strategic work. There's context switching issues when they're having to field these. So that's a core piece of the value proposition right there. We're actually servicing the business users, often within the tools that they are already comfortable with, such as Slack or Outlook, etc. Now, for more complex requests, those are prioritized, delegated, and tracked within the work management system. So you can see based on topic, kind of which board they go into, who it's assigned to. There's a whole host of analytics layered on top of that. So it provides legal department leadership with an understanding of how work is flowing through the department, who's working on what the related business value is, and also helps them to show some of the value they're creating to the enterprise as a whole. And then finally, the last element is this legal assistant, which is actually helping the attorneys in some of their day-to-day legal work. We're typically seeing people that are using the system, attorneys that are using the system, getting back to their business colleagues 25 to 70% faster. So there's a lot of different ways to add value within the platform. It's a modular platform. We have some people that are emphasizing some elements over others, but we don't tend to hit a lot of direct competitors with the same vision. I would say what we do sometimes hit is there are corporate legal departments that are trying to hack together generic tools and workflows. So using like a Jira, for example, tracking some of this in spreadsheets. So a lot of opportunity, I think, in this space particularly.
It seems like you have aspects for everyone all in the one platform. It seems like you're trying to bring everything in to the one place and centralize it rather than have a contract review tool here, a document management tool here. It seems like you're trying to bring it under the one roof, which I think is quite unique.
Yeah, so that's a great point. And I will say we're not necessarily trying to build out every module to address every need within the legal or compliance department. We do work very well with other tools, and we often see Coheso being used as that universal legal front door, kind of allocating tasks, tapping into other systems. To give you an example, we're working with a client that has implemented us in parallel with a CLM, a well-known CLM. So we have an integration there. We work with other clients that have implemented us against some of the kind of well-known Copilot type tools. So it can all be a very seamless process. Sometimes there's multiple repositories within an organization. So it's great to have an intuitive, easy to implement tool that binds all these together, and really helps, I think, in a couple ways. It helps to amplify the power of some of these other tools within the tech stack. And then also, we are seeing clients implement Coheso on the front end. And as they're getting a better understanding of how work is flowing through the department, that they can then say, okay, wow, we're spending a lot of time on negotiation of NDAs. We need a tool to address that. Or we need to hire another paralegal in this spot. So it really provides some helpful insight as they think about other ways to further amplify their impact within the enterprise.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Before we kind of move on to a few other points, Ned, I wanted to talk about SaaS metrics because what I thought was really interesting that you built eBrevia over 10 years ago and now building Coheso, it's such different landscapes to when you started then to where we are now. You know, core SaaS metrics like MRR, NDR, CAC to LTV were really and still are well established benchmarks, but AI enabled SaaS is changing the game, it would seem, and traditional playbooks don't always apply when AI is deeply embedded in a service type model. So we're seeing things like strong early traction in AI. Is it maybe masking, the scale of it? New pricing models. How do you price these AI powered legal tech startups that are moving beyond standard SaaS subscriptions? And I think one thing I always talk about, because as you know, I run an executive search firm in Zanata, and domain expertise is just becoming so critical. Unlike pure SaaS, AI legal tech companies are often selling not just software, but the expertise and the AI as a hybrid service. So from your side, I'd love to hear a little bit of insight as to how you feel like those metrics have evolved for, I guess, where you are now, which is an AI powered legal tech, of course.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say to your point, I think a lot of the types of metrics have stayed the same. So MRR, ARR, many of the other acronyms you mentioned, still very critical today. I think what has changed is some of the expectations around them, in terms of how quickly they can ramp up or how you can lower churn, for example. And a lot of that, to your point, is powered by the advances in AI and some of the features, that vertical AI companies are able to build in specifically, to accentuate a lot of the good metrics and, mitigate some of the more challenging ones. So yeah, I think the metrics are still key, but it's really, some of the expectations around them empowered by, what AI has been able to do.
Mm. It seems like again from the strong early traction that we see that can maybe mask whether AI is truly driving nonlinear scale, coupled with pricing the AI model at the right price point. It seems like from a lot of my conversation with founders and investors, that's where they're struggling at the moment with that. Okay, there's really strong early traction because it's AI, AI, AI. It's speeding things up from days into seconds, but and again, we're just not sure of this pricing model at scale. It does feel a little bit like everyone is feeling their way about the dark at the moment, just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and I think it's, AI is just having a tremendous impact in so many ways, on SaaS companies, on the legal industry more broadly. So I think there's going to be a lot to see how it plays out in terms of business models and metrics. I think there's a lot of issues on the law firm side too. This is
Yeah.
is is going to be a different landscape, and when you think about digital first firms and hourly billing, and I mean, there's just a lot to think through, and where who's doing what work? Is it? I mean, I think the metric was, 54% of enterprise legal spend now is staying in house at the enterprise. That's up from 40% a decade ago. Will AI continue to drive that trend, bringing a lot of the legal analysis closer to the business, let's say? Or are you going to see law firms, and law firms, candidly, I mean, this is something that's been a big change from when I started eBrevia in 2012. Just the innovation teams at law firms and their sophistication and enthusiasm for adopting AI, it's like night and day. I remember in 2012, it was really the audit consulting firms like the Big Four, that were more innovative in terms of their processes, et cetera. And we've seen the law firms just really pick up the pace. It's always a pleasure. chatting
Mm.
with law firm innovation teams. Very sophisticated, very savvy. So yeah, I think it's. I mean, that's the fun part is seeing how all this plays out. I will say to your other point around domain expertise, I agree. I think that's absolutely critical. It was important when we started eBrevia. I think it's very important now with Coheso as well, and that's something we've always looked to have in both businesses. So with Coheso, our project managers or the folks that are engaging with our clients are attorneys by training. So they understand the processes, they understand the pain points, they have deep legal tech expertise as well. And I
Yeah.
think that brings a lot of credibility to the conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. A bit of a side question here, but just more curious as you said, something that popped into my head. Do you think it's easier to sell a legal tech product now than it was, like, say, 10 years ago? A lot of convincing 10 years ago, a lot of taboo in the market about do we want technology? Do we want to speed up our working processes, billable hours, etc.? So do you feel like it's easier to build a legal tech product and sell it to the market now than it was 10 years ago?
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely,
absolutely.
unquestionably, for sure.
Yeah. And 2025 is for me anyway, and I think for everyone, is the year of, you've kind of got these two waves of innovation right now, or three waves. The first one was document management a long time ago. And now it's about using AI to take that unstructured data and structure it. But now we're seeing this overlap of the waves where it's now becoming the year of agentic AI. I mean, for those that are still figuring this out, what that means for law and legal, like, what does that actually mean for you for legal tech, i.e., the year of agentic AI?
Yeah, so I do think it's an incredibly exciting year. I think we'll see a lot of these systems have more autonomous components. I think with respect to legal tech specifically, so with for agentic AI, rather than calling an LLM and maybe getting a kind of a vanilla answer based out of a contract, it's actually looking at the contract, looking at the amendments, finding the controlling language across, doing a lot of this without having to make all these very specific queries. Just really, here's the task, and then here's the output. I do think it's going to continue to be critical to have humans overseeing what the AI is doing. I know that's something we've heavily focused on when designing and building the Coheso system. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, with Coheso, as these inquiries are made by the business side, legal and compliance does have the ability, if they want, to validate them first before responses go back. Everything that's produced has a link to evidence, so there's a lot of transparency in terms of how the answers are generated. Often you hear with AI the ability or the tendency for some systems to hallucinate. We were actually just chatting with a client the other day. They had asked a question of another system, and it had made up an answer saying something was contained in an underlying document they had that wasn't actually there. They asked the same question of the Coheso system, and the system simply said, I don't, I can't come up with an answer. It's not in the document." So I think that the ability to know this for the system to know its limitations is critical as well in terms of building confidence and comfort for the legal or compliance team. The other thing I'll just mention with respect to Coheso, again, in terms of transparency and accountability, any question that the system answers is all contained in logs. It's very accessible for folks so they can see when the question came in, who asked it, what the
Mm.
response was. And that holds true for a lot of the substantive legal tasks that humans are involved in as well as they're tracked throughout the analytics and dashboard. So I guess a long-winded way of getting back to your question or your statement. 2025, the year of agentic AI, definitely super exciting, but humans are going to have to continue to be a big part of the workflow.
I don't like to put a negative spin on it at all, because I am one of the optimists. I'm super excited about AI. I'm not one of these people that fears for their jobs for it or thinks lawyers won't. But where are the dangers with AI? And I don't ask that in the sense of, is it going to replace our jobs? It's like, where is the danger with overusing it, over automating, overusing the agentic AI? Like, I think we all read that case where some junior lawyer pulled up ChatGPT in a court case and just completely cited off a case that was not real. So the smarter these machines get, the more we trust them. So where I feel like we are potentially going down a bit of a dangerous route, but it's not the route that we all keep talking about, which is the displacement of jobs. I actually feel like there's a big danger in too much of it at this early stage.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's where that oversight is really critical. Knowing how to use the tool, understanding the limitations of the tool, understanding what elements need to be verified, and making the workflow really conducive to that accountability, to that verification. Yeah, I mean that's case you mentioned with Steve Schwartz, the lawyer, is classic. I mean that's a canary in the coal mine. So certainly, certainly take heed. But yeah, to your point, I mean, I think there's just a tremendous amount of potential here. And most of the in-house legal and compliance departments we're talking to, they're overwhelmed with work. There's plenty for them to do. So clearing out a lot of these lower level tasks really allows them to focus on many of the more strategic level initiatives.
Mm. Lower level tasks and medium level or more important level tasks. Maybe there's law firms, people that work for law firms or early stage startup businesses or whatever they may be that listen to this, like, and they're trying to decipher what is a low level task that's not worth automating versus a more valuable task. Because I think a lot of people right now are, again, that's the danger. They're maybe automating stuff that shouldn't be automated in law firms. But how do you decide what's low? And because it's all valuable work, isn't it?
Yeah, so I can give you some examples of that. So, I mean, for example, you might have business users asking the legal or compliance department a whole host of questions. Some of them might be process related questions. Who has the authority to sign contracts over 100,000? Something like that, I would say a lot of legal departments would say, yeah, if we could just answer that question quickly for the business user, rather than distracting someone on the legal team, that's great. Pretty low risk, pretty crystal clear answer. Provided you have the relative signing authority matrix, et cetera. And then you have other questions that might be more contract related questions. When does this contract renew? What's the monthly pricing? Things like that. Again, pretty easy to automate and provide very clear and digestible responses back on. Then you might have some policy related questions, which do require interpretation of a given policy. Again, potentially something you'd want to automate. Maybe if the question is in a certain domain, so if you're getting repeated questions around the anti-bribery policy, for example, that could be something where there's an issue there. Maybe there's some need for additional education or other ways to mitigate that risk. So I think there you do want that. That's where kind of the ability to view the questions coming in, understand the logs, see how the work is flowing through based on the dashboard, allows you to say, okay, what are the conversations we want to insert an attorney into or insert someone from the compliance team into. And it's not so much because, hey, the software won't get it right, but it's more because why are you asking the question? Like getting at some of those underlying themes to try to, again, mitigate risk for the business, and keep the business moving efficiently ahead to hit its business imperatives.
Mm. How long do you think AI will remain as this thing that you're describing it as, the assistant, versus evolving into something far more autonomous and more specialist and almost like a full-time hire and a human being, but you're kind of hiring a model? Like, how do you think we're still a long way off of that happening and in the legal tech space?
Yeah, so I think the underlying technology is moving incredibly fast.
Mm.
And my guess is it will probably get to a level where it's able to add that level of value before people hit that level where they're super comfortable with it. So I think there are a lot of ethical implications, regulatory implications, bar associated guidelines, et cetera, that kind of have to catch up and be thought through as well. So it's beyond, I think, just what the technology can do, and really how we're thinking about adoption of this technology as a profession.
Mm. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting just moment that we're in As I say, it'll be really interesting to see where we are with the agentic stuff this time next year, if we are effectively creating many paralegals, or many junior lawyers off these models.
Yeah, I mean, things are moving incredibly fast. Yeah, I think it's a lot of this is more of a question of when as opposed to if. And as I
Mm,
said before, I think this is going to have implications for a whole host of different, areas and elements of the profession, from junior associate training to business models to who is doing what work and where, and how different types of entities are working together, whether they're vendors, alternative legal service providers, in-house legal teams, law firms, audit consulting firms. All of that will shift and evolve over time as this very new and exciting and disruptive force has entered the profession.
and again, I don't ask this in a cynical way, but it's more for probably reassurance to some people that will be listening and more on the junior end, the mid-level end, thinking, what value can I add to any law firm or any legal tech or the legal space for the next 20 years? And this person's 21 years old. Like, what should they be thinking about in terms of being this new wave of almost like a digital first lawyer? Do you feel like they maybe growing up now and studying law and practicing law and being a lawyer, now that they've got use of ChatGPT, do you feel like maybe they don't learn as much themselves now? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think there's opportunities for different types of learning. So when I was practicing, as I said, how I started my career as a junior associate doing M&A, focused heavily on due diligence. And I learned about legal contracts by going through data rooms and reading through all
Hmm.
the target company's leases and customer contracts and license agreements and employment agreements.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll be honest, I don't know that that was always the best use of my time. Maybe maybe the first 100 hours was, but the next 2,000 hours probably wasn't. Across what I was doing for a year. But yeah, I think with the advances in AI, there's other opportunities to learn ways to quickly get up to speed on given areas of law. And I do think it provides professionals with an opportunity to really scale their domain expertise. To go back to one of your earlier questions, that domain expertise is critical, and I think more that junior associates and others in the profession can do to garner that level of expertise, the better. And whether it's leveraging AI tools or working with colleagues and mentors, it should certainly be an area of focus.
Mm. And kind of touching on the domain aspect there that we've spoke about a few times. Like, how's the team structured at Coheso currently? Like, what's the makeup of the organization right now?
Yeah, so we're primarily a team made up of former practicing attorneys with legal tech experience, with business experience, and then AI focused engineers. So my three co-founders are all, it was actually really nice complementary skill set from a founding team perspective. My three co-founders are all AI focused engineers. They had built other successful legal tech products, had actually studied at a graduate program at Carnegie Mellon University, one of the best universities in the world
Yeah.
for AI.
Aye.
And then we've done some great hiring too. I would say, one of the lessons I've learned from eBrevia, which had a really strong team, through Coheso, is just how critical it is to bring together smart and passionate people. In this case, as I said, we're primarily focused on the engineering side, product side, and the legal domain side. Areas that we could, probably use to beef up a little bit are sales and marketing. We haven't focused quite as much on those areas, but have really been laser focused on building a product that resonates with our clients and taking into account client feedback to continue to enhance it.
All right, man. But yeah, look, I enjoyed it. Thanks for the time, Ned.
All right. Thanks
All
very
right.
much.
Take
Talk to
care.
you soon.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. You too. Bye bye.